Hi everyone, and welcome to the second ever LinkedIn Live, doing a Sam's Business Growth Show, and delighted to be joined by Shabri Lakhani today. She's the founder and CEO over at SalesWorks. Shabri, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
No, I appreciate it, and excited to chat through all things sales, business growth, and learn some of the both digital marketing and some of the offline strategies that you've utilized to grow your own company. I'll just do a very quick intro on yourself. So understand you've got 10 years of experience within inside sales and sales development, where you spent 7 years at one of the largest fintechs in Europe, Finastra, where you've grown a team from 2 to 50 people, whilst creating revenue generating inside sales team closing around 3 million annually. In 2018, Shabri started SalesWorks, which is a global training consulting firm working with B2B software companies from seed to scaling, focused on sales team development. And it's reimagined the legacy approach to training. And very recently, I understand the company's been acquired. So congratulations on that. Great news. So
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to chatting through that. So yeah, let's jump right in, Shabri. As a start, it'd be great to get a bit of background on yourself. So how you first got into sales, and the business world in general, and perhaps you could share with us a few actionable tips that you picked up along the way, be it in sales, marketing, or business in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've got about 10 years experience within the world of sales. And so I actually started my career at Finastra, which is how I first got into sales. I started as a sales development rep. It wasn't really a thing back then. So I remember telling my friends who were starting careers in banks and law firms and PR agencies that I was going to be an SDR. And I kind of got a lot of blank looks on their faces. So I decided that I wanted to do something within the financial industry, and sales seemed like a good place for me to start, for me to build a full skill set. Actually, one thing that's not on my LinkedIn, and a lot of people don't know about me, that wasn't my first taste of sales. My first taste of sales was actually between the summer of my second and third year at university. I went over to the US. I picked the hottest state, so I went over to Arizona. And nice. I actually did a summer of door-to-door selling, which is actually probably the toughest sales role like I've ever done. I mean, door-to-door selling in 45-degree heat, where you're selling educational books, and you kind of map out the roads that you're going to go down and how you're going to start selling. It was definitely one of the most challenging roles I've ever done, and I think it taught me a hell of a lot. My SDR role at Finastra was very different to that. So the kind of chalk and cheese, financial software. But yeah, that's a fun fact about me.
Awesome, and I bet door-to-door selling, like you say, let alone in the UK, it's going to be hard enough. Or being in the blazing heat must have been an absolute mission. So, were there some things you picked up? If it was your first taste in sales, what were some of the lessons you learned whilst you were doing that, Shabri?
So I think planning was just so key. Like, you can't just walk down a road and just knock on everyone's door, right? And it's amazing to see how much of that is transferable from what I did then to even how we sell now, right? So you think about the road, you think about who your ideal customer profile is. It's someone with children. It's someone who's trying to keep their children distracted during the summer. You think about your addressable market. So I used to have a little piece of paper and I used to mark down people's houses and, ask for referrals. So, if I'd speak to someone the same way that we would now. And so, some of the lessons that I learned was kind of that first 30 seconds and that, someone's opening their door to their home to you. And that first 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds is so important of how you present yourself, how you communicate, and how you actually build relationships. And, those are all transferable things that, I took with me as I went into kind of the world of B2B sales as well. But also the other thing that I learned, which is, pivotal to sales and what we do now, is how you ask questions, right? And it was so funny because I remember when we were doing our training, they said you can't just knock on the door and say, do you have kids? Like, how creepy does that sound, right? It's like,
that's a good point.
Yeah. So how you ask questions, open-ended questions, and how you kind of go through discovery and how you genuinely trying to find out useful information about people. That's again another lesson that I learned, that, you know, is and don't push, right? Like, I think door-to-door selling is so hard, and I haven't done it since. But, you know, door-to-door selling is really difficult. So just kind of understanding how you deal with resilience and how you deal. I had doors slammed in my face, right? How do you deal with that? And it's the same as having, you know, the phone put down on you and everything like that. So dealing with the resilience, I think, was something I learned a huge amount about that summer. I think I learned tons about myself too, but it was, you know, it was challenging.
Those are some awesome points. So we started with working out your ideal customer. So like you say, what was it you were selling exactly? Did you say educational books there, Shabri?
Yeah, so we did books all the way from sort of preschool all the way up to like the SAT, which in the UK is A-level stage. So kind of anything aimed from a 2-year-old to a 17-year-old. We had everything.
Got it. Okay, so in your case, you had to map out exactly where I guess the families lived in the area, so the target market that was relevant to the product you're offering. And then you mentioned the first 30 seconds are crucial. So can we dive into that a bit deeper, as in what exactly you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, and there's a ton of research that shows, you know, people make judgments of you in, you know, milliseconds, right? But you've really got about 6 seconds to make a first impression. And so, you know, it was 45 degrees heat. So, you know, you're kind of in t-shirt and shorts, and you've got a big backpack with a couple of samples books in front of you, right? And, you know, I think also I was British as well. So they knew I wasn't local. So kind of coming in with this British accent. So, you know, if I got a referral, it was a lot easier because I could say, you know, hey, I was just speaking to Sam at number 36, and he mentioned that he's working with me coming in to, you know, see how you guys are doing, and how you're keeping your kids entertained this summer. It was really difficult to do that cold, and, you know, really difficult when someone starts yelling at you saying, you know, like, how dare you knock at my door? You know, what are you doing here? And I think it's just kind of, again, you know, that overcoming those objections. How do you deal with that and not being in a pushy way? It's difficult. It's a lot different, I think, when you're calling someone and they say, I'm not interested. When you're looking at the whites of someone's eyes at their front door and they're saying, I'm not interested, go away. I think it's just important to maintain that composure and sort of progress that conversation with confidence as well.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And then another awesome point that you raised was it's about how you ask questions. So a lot of people that are tuning in, whether they're watching live or whether they're listening in or watching the video, might not understand the importance of asking great questions, and that is a really solid way to build confidence with your prospective customers and your buyers. So in this case, how did that work? Because, you know, as we were saying earlier, Shabri, you couldn't just go there straight away and say, look, do you guys have kids? Because they probably slam your door or call the local authorities. So how can we ease it in? How can we build rapport? Are there any ways that you found have been useful to be able to build rapport with your ideal customers and then be able to ask some of the tougher questions that are going to give us the information we need to be able to qualify if this customer is going to be able to do business with us or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that, I think had I done that role today, I think I'd approach it a little bit differently, because I think we're in a world now where everything's at our fingertips. You know, Amazon's sort of, people don't really like buy door to door anymore, right? So I think the competition's higher. I think the need to stand out is a lot more. I think personalization is key. So I think building rapport, you kind of going into to someone's house. I think, you know, the same way that people make judgments about us, I think we can make judgments about people and how they're going to react. So if someone opens the door and they've got a big smile on their face, and, you know, often, you know, there were times which it was easy. Someone would open the door and they'd have a, you know, 5-year-old child wrapped around their leg. And so you can kind of use that to start the conversation, or a dog in the background, or you could hear children, or you could make conversation about something you saw in their front garden or something like that. Often when there was nothing, you know, the way that I'd be able to go in is just say, you know, hey, good morning. I was actually just talking to Sam next door, and I thought I'd come and, you know, to pay you a visit and introduce myself as well. I think when it comes to questioning, in sales, you know, we do a lot of training of sales teams, and one of the things that we spend a lot of time training on is wide net questions, and asking those wide net questions to elicit longer responses. So if I say to you, you know, hey, Sam, are you having a good day? You've got 2 answers. You've got yes or no, right? But if I say, hey, Sam, how's Tuesday started? It's the same question, but just asking it in a different way, you're much more likely to give me a longer response. And another reason why that question is quite good is because it is likely for you to share what's going on in your day. So if I knocked on your door and I said, hey, Sam, how's Tuesday started? You might say, it's been a nightmare. I've had the kids running around. And that's great because I can say, well, actually, what are you doing this summer to keep your kids entertained and that sort of thing. So it opens up the conversation a little bit more. And I think the what and how questions that we ask in sales are so important. Salespeople often think why questions are good. And actually, we tend to advise people keeping away from why questions because they can sound a little bit accusatory and people can get a bit defensive. So, the what and how questions, and it's so simple because I think most questions you ask, it's just really easy to kind of switch that into a what and how question to get longer responses from your prospect.
Got it. Okay, so using open-ended questions as an initial starter to start building rapport and building off that. Got it. Awesome. Okay, so start off with door knocking. What was next up for you, Shabri? What was the next role you got into?
Yeah, so then I started at a company at the time. It was called Mysis, now it's called Finastra. It grew by merger and acquisition, but I started there as an SDR. So I did just under 18 months there as an SDR, calling banks and financial institutions, selling enterprise financial technology. And it was a great role. Like, it taught me a lot about sales. I got familiar with just communication, prospecting, the sales process. So that was a really good role, I felt, for me to start with and sort of build my confidence within the industry, the product and sales, really. After that, they wanted to grow the team. And so I took on my first manager role at the age of 22. So I got promoted to be team lead for Europe and Americas. So that was initially the focus regions that we wanted to grow out. So then after that, they saw some success in those regions and they wanted to move to some of the more emerging markets, so Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. And so I moved to Dubai for 3 years, and I spent 3 years out in the region focusing on Middle East, Africa, and Asia. I then came back from Dubai and spent another 2 years in London, and I then sort of rebuilt and grew the team again for inside sales and sales development. And then in 2018, I left. So that was kind of a snapshot of my career at Finastra.
Yeah, got it. So at Finastra, you grew quite a big team, didn't you? So it started around 2, if I remember right, and then you grew that up to 50. So, and it was pretty short space of time, really, around 7 years or so. And like you say, you were selling to all different countries. So how were you able to make that happen, Shabri? What was some of the secrets that enabled you to grow so fast?
Yeah, good question. So, I think at the start, what we realized was there was no process and there was no structure. So a lot of the initial things that I did was just building out, some of the basic things around alignment between marketing and sales development, between sales and sales development. But in order for the team to grow and the team to scale, like, that process had to be repeatable. One of the things that took a huge amount of time was hiring. And hiring when you're hiring graduates with little to no experience and you're hiring on raw talent, it's really difficult. We spent a ton of time hiring and training. And so one of the things that I had to change to allow me to grow that team so rapidly was just to actually start hiring in cohorts, to hire once or twice a year. So moving away from hiring 2 people a month, 3 people the next month, 3 people the next month, we just hired in bulk. So it meant that there was 2 points of the year which were just crazy busy, but hiring 15 people at a time or 20 people at a time, onboarding them all together, massively increased the efficiency and productivity of that process. So instead of onboarding being this whole monstrous 8-week program, it was a 2-week intensive bootcamp style training. So on the hiring and onboarding side, that's where we saw a lot of quick wins, really.
Got it. Okay, so hiring in bulk. And this is always a tricky one that I like to ask business owners that come on, Shabri. Are there any tips or insights you've got? So for anyone tuning in that is perhaps thinking of building up their sales staff or their staff in general. I've always found hiring sales guys or girls to be very difficult because they quite often talk the talk or walk the walk on the interview. They say, yeah, last month I closed, I don't know, 20, 30 grand. But I was 3 times over quota and did this, did that. But then it comes to the crunch. They've been working you for a few months and they're nowhere near what they said they were going to hit. They're not making the dials, or they're not sending the emails, or not putting in the activity, and they're just not getting the sales revenue. So have you got any ideas that you could share that have worked for you in terms of how you can kind of differentiate the blaggers from the achievers?
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good question. I actually recently wrote a blog on this, and one of the things that I like to do in hiring, and I think I've seen a number of companies move toward doing this, is actually including a written assessment and a written assignment as part of the interview process. And I think that shows drive. It shows someone's ability to like actually want and desire to want the job. I love that you call them blaggers, because we all see these in sales, right? Where they're like, I'm great at this, I'm great at that. And so having a written assignment, I think achieves a couple of things. I think firstly, it shows someone's passion for the role. I think we often forget that when we're interviewing people, they're also interviewing us. Like, it's such a competitive market right now. They're probably interviewing at 3, 4, 5 different companies. So getting someone to invest, 30 to 45 minutes to do a written assignment and actually sit down and have a think about something, I think does start to eliminate the blaggers from the high performers. And what that typically looks like and how I've used it in the past is to ask someone to go on the website, think about a persona that they would target, and actually draft an email to a persona. And what I'm looking for there is not necessarily the right or perfect answer, but I'm looking at how someone approaches that. I'm looking at written communication. I think written communication, personally, I find it's quite difficult to coach people. I think there are a ton of things that you can train and coach people on. I think written communication is one of the ones that I think is harder. I think it's innate and how people kind of develop that. But I also think it shows creativity and how people think, right? Is that someone that you want to put in front of a client? Is that someone that you want to let manage your key accounts? Think about how they're going to approach that and manage expectations on time and say, look, this is going to take you about 30 to 45 minutes. Some people won't do it, right? But that's going to save you time and it just eliminates them out from the process. And if they don't do it, that's fine. And so I think, the point that you raised is something I've experienced before, is just the talkers. But actually, when it comes to doing, they don't do anything. So this for me has been quite a key point in the interview process. And if there's any business owners out there, I completely understand how important it is to get your new hires right when it's your own business. Risk is a lot higher, and you don't necessarily have an appetite of risk. So I'd encourage companies to try that out and think about it. There was one I read last week that someone said they asked people to come in and present something on a topic that they know more about the people who are interviewing, which is really great, right? Because it kind of makes you think of if I was, what do I know more about than Sam, and how do I go and present that, right? So there are a ton of different exercises and assessments that you can do, but I think I'd encourage people to start to think about how they embed that in their process.
That's a really interesting point and something I've not heard before. So the written assessment I love, because like you say, it's going to help you understand how creative they are, how professional they're going to be with clients. I'd also add that, in my opinion anyway, and I've had a few debates with people on this over LinkedIn, that salespeople should be creating their own content. So be that blogs, be that videos, be that podcasts, be that LinkedIn posts. We shouldn't rely purely on marketing to give us leads. We should be actively generating our own leads. So I don't care if it's cold calling, email, but with digital the way it is now, it's so easy to start creating your own copy content, doing LinkedIn posts, doing videos, doing podcasts, whatever it may be, to get the engagement, build the trust, and start inbound opportunities coming your way. So I guess it helps a bit in terms of showing how good they're going to be at that, how well they're going to be able to craft emails, in terms of the way they actually put words together, how they can reach out to people. So yeah, I love that. It's really interesting and a unique spin that I've not heard on. Okay, cool. One other thing on that role, Shabri. So it sounds like you're working with clients all over the shop, so many different countries. Now, I at WebChoice, we sell digital marketing solutions. So I deal with mainly UK, and then we sometimes have clients around Europe and US, but probably about 80% of our client base is UK with a few other countries in between. So would you say there's much of a difference between selling to UK businesses to all the different overseas clients that you've dealt with? Is it much more difficult? Is it easier? Or tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think that the big differences I've personally seen are UK and some of the Middle Eastern countries that I spent quite a lot of time dealing with. So I think the way they approach sales there, I think the way they approach marketing there is very different. So they engage less with things like webinars, and it's more about that kind of face-to-face relationship. Even when we were doing events, we used to send personalized hand-delivered invites, and so I think it was just a lot more personal. So one of the things that, when I was running the SDR team in Middle East was, it was really easy to get a meeting because everyone wants to meet. It's a very relationship-driven culture. Like, everyone wants to meet, but actually the conversion then from meeting to opportunity was actually a lot lower. Whereas I find in the UK, it's harder to get a meeting, but the conversion is a lot higher because I think people are protective of their time. And they, it's a genuine need or interest when they accept that. I think, there's a similar difference, I think, in the way we approach sales with the US as well. And I know there's been, during lockdown, a ton of UK versus US kind of debates and things like that. Sure. But I think that has, that's definitely something that I've observed, which is, it's just a bit different in the way that we sell. There's small nuances, like I think the US still use voicemail a bit more than we do in the UK. And it's just small things like that. I think the video started in the US a lot earlier than we started. So I think it's just they're a little bit more advanced in some of those ways than we perhaps are as it relates to sales.
Great. Okay. Well, I'd like to move on now to your business SalesWorks. So it'd be interesting to know a bit more about why you started that and when the moment was you decided to go out on your own.
Yeah, so it's been just over 2 years now since I started SalesWorks. When I left Finastra, I realized what I really enjoyed doing was building and optimizing sales development and inside sales teams. I did it for 4 of the regions. I realized that's what I really enjoyed doing. So I decided that I would go and speak to a couple of companies. I started interviewing, and I realized that there was a huge need for companies to build this. I think what I was seeing was companies were investing a lot more in digital marketing. So a lot more marketing qualified leads were being generated, and with that, specialization of roles was being created as well. So, companies who historically had salespeople who would do from lead to close were looking at building teams that would focus from lead to opportunity and allowing their account executives and account managers to focus on closing and relationships. But what I saw was a lot of people putting up their hand, asking for help, and didn't really know how to do it. And so that's when I decided to start SalesWorks. So for the first 9 months or so, we were purely consulting. We worked with companies both in the UK and US on helping them either grow their team or helping them build a team for the first time. So everything from hiring to onboarding to process. At SalesWorks, we use the 4S framework. So that's skills, structure, strategy, and systems. And those are the 4 areas that we believe need to be aligned for a high-performing sales team. So where I'd say now about over a year ago, one of our clients asked us to build out training programs for their teams, and that's something that I did at Finastra, but I'm not a sales trainer, and so I did it. And what I realized was it was just a completely different approach to sales training that I had in the past. And personally, I've had a bad experience with sales training with my teams in the past. I think it's one of those things that has a bit of a bad reputation because I think there are more people that do it badly than do it well. Whether it was e-learning or whether it was, classroom style learning, I've probably spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars in training my teams in the past and not really seen a great ROI. So what I realized with the challenges with training was implementation. People just came back and didn't do anything differently, very fragmented, and it was a one-off event, right? So, if you want to lose weight, you don't just go to the gym once. right? And it's the same with sales skills.
I wish you could do that, but unfortunately not.
Yeah. Don't we all, Sam? And so, so what I realized was things had to be repeatable, and there had to be an accountability. So we built the SalesWorks Academy, and all of our trainers are practitioners. So they're all have recently been salespeople or sales leaders, because that was another thing that I found with sales training was someone was a sales rep 20 years ago, right? And things, as we look at digital selling and things like that, things have just dramatically changed. And so, I'd say over the last 14, 15 months or so, the business has shifted its focus significantly to the training side of things. And so we build and run sales training programs for companies that are interactive and practical, and they're repeatable as well. So it's training paired with one-to-one coaching. So it's a 3-month program of training and coaching, and that's been something that we've seen work really, really well. And especially during this pandemic, we've shifted to remote. And then in May, we recently got acquired by a Boston-based investment holding company, and that's really two sort of main gains from that. One is we've added the number of practitioners and expanded the services we're able to offer to our customers. So previously our training was for SDRs and inside sales, and now we've expanded training to customer success, account executive, and account managers. So really, we can work with an entire commercial organization and train them so they've got one standard way of doing things. So it's exciting for our customers, and also it expands our geographical reach as well. So expanding into North America, especially for companies who've got a sales team in North America and the UK, to be able to work with companies across that geographical reach has been great as well.
Awesome. So we've covered some great stuff there, and I loved the fact that you said that sales training is not a one-off thing. So just like if you're going to the gym, working out, you can't just go once every month. Hope you're going to get a six-pack. Hope you're going to get super lean or super muscular, whatever your goals are. You got to go consistently. So it's interesting you should say that, and also the point you raised that the sales trainers that you employ are actually practitioners. So I'm sure we've all had a sales trainer or heard about a sales trainer that came in, told us about this massive deal they closed about 10 years ago, and they haven't picked up the phone or sent an email or done any cold outreach since. So yeah, that's great. So in terms of that training side of things, I'm sure we've all had the story of sales reps being employed, kind of given their half a day or 1 day's training, then just told to get on with it. Are there any tips in terms of what companies should not be doing in terms of when it comes to sales training? So massive no-nos, and then any maybe 2 or 3 points on what they definitely should be doing to kind of keep their staff motivated, because sales is a tough gig, right? And business in general, it's hard to keep your motivation, and especially when you've had a few bad days or bad weeks, it's sometimes tricky to get that positive mindset going.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's a good question. So when we look at the no's, don't have a training where it's just a trainer talking for 8 hours at your rep, or whether it's, let's say it's a manager, your manager doing the training. That's not going to work. Our attention span is decreasing just day by day with just all the distractions that we have. We tend to remember when we do something. When we do something practical, we will remember 30% of what we've been taught, right? 30% is not very much. No. When we aren't doing something practical, it drops to about 15, 20%. So as practical as you can make the training, the more likely you are to sort of pick that up and remember it.
Sure.
I think for leaders, business owners, the positioning of the training is really important, right? If you send someone a link to e-learning and say, you need to complete this by Friday, they're going to complete that as a tick box exercise. And you smile, but the number of times I've seen and heard that, right? And that's why, nothing will change. They'll say oh, my manager's asking me to do this by Friday. I've got to get this done. They won't really understand the importance and the why. So having just making that purpose and really, really clear when you're doing the training, I think is really important. Setting expectations and build some accountability, but I think leaders and business owners are accountable as well. And I think the role that they can play is how do they reinforce that? So is it call coaching? Is it deal coaching? Is it just general coaching, right? You can't just like say to your teams, okay, we'll go and do the training and then I expect you to hit your quota. Like business owners, leaders all have to play a role in that as well. So I think being hands-on, being, looking at where the accountability lies, I think it's on both people, making training as interactive as possible. And try and, now we're remote. We don't do full one-day trainings anymore. We break them up and we do sprints. So we do 2-hour sessions and a kind of high-intensity sessions, because we know people aren't going to sit in front of a laptop in the same way they would have done in person for 8 hours and take everything in. So, I think there's just some things that people can do around making sure that that training is consumable and it's productive as well.
Yeah, love that. And I love the point you made about the kind of hands-on, the coaching side of things. Because like you say, a lot of training is just read the material or go on the online course, tick a few boxes, read a few things and you're done. Whereas if you've actually got someone with you that's been in the trenches, done the work you're doing, so whether your sales development, or your business development, or your account manager, whatever role you're playing, they've actually done it, and then they're with you coaching, whether it's your calls, your emails, going through, giving you tips, giving you insights, and helping you, literally holding your hand to take you to the next step. That sounds so much more powerful. So that really makes sense. All right, Shabri, what I'm keen to get into is, so you started the company in 2018. And it's been acquired now. We're in 2020, so that's super fast. That's some serious growth. So I'd love to learn how you've scaled it so quickly. And I'm sure the audience, everyone tuning in, would love to know some of the channels that you've employed, be them offline or be them digital marketing, that have helped you see that growth so quickly.
Yeah, so I think what really helped fuel the company, the first year was all about sort of building my network, understanding the industry a bit more, working on, getting some good referenceable clients under, and sort of building that value really, really quickly. In the second year, when we realized that the value that clients wanted to see was actually in training. So I think pivoting toward that quite quickly made quite a big difference. I think, building our partner ecosystem has been really valuable within the first that happened actually at the start of the second year. So, partnering with complementary companies, so SalesLoft being one of them, which is, has been great and sort of a huge name in the sales engagement space. We've got talent partners, got other tool and tech stack providers. And so that was, I think, nailing down the kind of area and industry and networks we wanted to be visible in. So last year, we also made the decision to be a sponsor for Self Confidence, which is, one of the largest networking and events for B2B SaaS sales professionals. And so knowing that was an industry and network that we wanted to be associated with, we made the decision that, whilst it was probably something that I hadn't expected to do that early on, we realized that was, a huge win for us. So I think we took some risks, and I think placing bets on networks and industry events and things like that, I think has been really important. I think we were seeing a ton of success at events and things like that. We're at a completely different stage now. So at the start of 2020, we actually ramped up digital marketing, and we hired a social media marketer to focus on channels. When I started SalesWorks, I knew that I wanted to create a ton of content, so blogs, articles, and things like that. What I realized at the start of this year was it was all associated to me. So I wanted to focus on building up the brand awareness of SalesWorks. So LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. So having someone focus on that day in, day out, was really important, just to kind of build brand awareness. I always struggle to measure the ROI from brand, because I think it's quite difficult to do that. But, I think that's something that was important. We're going through a website rebrand right now and refresh, because I think now the environment we're in, people are spending more and more time on the digital assets that you provide. And so that's been really key for us to focus, and, something that has been a high priority for us during this time.
Excellent. Great to hear that you're ramping up digital marketing. So year one, Shabri, you said it was mainly about acquiring and getting on board great clients. How did that happen? Did you already have clients from previous roles that you had relationships with that you were able to bring on, or were you hitting it cold? Were you hitting cold calls, emails, referrals, that kind of stuff, or was it digital? Or talk us through a bit more about how you were actually able to bring these clients on board.
So everything that we did in the first year, we were fortunate that everything was through referrals. So it was either people I had worked with in the past, or it was through, connections and referrals and things like that. Then when we started going to a lot more events and investing in events and sponsorship and speaking at events, in the first year I spoke at 5 events globally, which was something that I decided to invest in more time in, just sort of building up brand and building up that thought leadership aspect as well. Actually, interestingly, we only just started outbound sales in SalesWorks 2 months ago. So up until now, everything has been sort of inbound referrals and through things like that. So we've just started that. We've relied quite heavily on digital marketing, and I think that we've just started paid search and things like that. So we're I think we're in a different space now than we were 6 months ago. And so right now it's just kind of A/B testing what works, what doesn't work. And then we'll be able to double down on some of those strategies.
Awesome. Okay, so it sounds like a bit of a multi-channel approach, a lot of referral based, and now kind of moving more into outbound, looking at digital channels, and a few things like networking events, sponsoring events, and public speaking, which is interesting, as I think only 1 or 2 guests we've had on the show so far have said that's been quite a good channel to generate business. Is that something you had quite a bit of success with, Shabri?
I think it's been successful for building connections and building, sort of your brand awareness and building your credibility in that space.
Sure.
I think one of the things that I realized when I left Finastra, I realized that I hadn't done a lot of industry related stuff. Every event I went to was one of Finastra's events, for example. So I hadn't done a lot of industry related stuff. So I realized that I needed to build credibility with a different network and sort of position myself as somebody who is an expert in this field in a sort of different sphere. And so it has built, it's built relationships and it's built credibility. I don't know if I can say a lot of them built, sort of directly lead generation, or if they have, it's not been immediate. It's been, I'm talking to someone now who said, I saw you speak at an event last year. So it's not been immediate, but I think that's okay.
Makes sense. And that's quite often the case with things in digital as well. So like LinkedIn, over time, you're building your credibility with content, and you might not have ever spoken to someone and they might have been following you for a year, 6 months, whatever. And then they reach out to you, say, look, I've been seeing your posts on X, on Y, and Z. I can see that you know what you're talking about. Then they reach out to you, you've got an inbound lead. Or much the same with paid advertising or SEO. It might be that someone keeps seeing your brand in front of them, and over time, they've got that trust that they're then ready to take the step and inquire with you. Cool. Okay, we've covered some great ground, Shabri. Now, for anyone that's listening and tuning in, that's thinking of taking the jump and starting off on their own and building their own business, have you got any tips or insights that might make their first few weeks or months a little bit easier, in terms of any golden nuggets advice really for anyone that wants to take the jump?
Okay, golden nuggets or advice. I think my first golden nugget would be take a risk, right? A lot of people that I speak to say, I'm thinking about going off on my own. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I should do it. Ask yourself what's the worst that could happen, right? Even if you do it for 3 months and it doesn't work and you end up doing a bit of consulting and you go back to something else, that's not a bad outcome. I say no one wakes up saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. People wake up wanting to fix a problem. So ask yourself, what problem is it that you're trying to fix? Because if you're not trying to fix a problem, then ask yourself, who's your ideal customer profile going to be? What are you trying to do? So kind of get that why out first would be my first tip. My second tip would be surround yourself with good people, right? Whether that's partners or sort of former colleagues or whoever that might be, because it can be quite lonely at the start. I went from a 10,000 person company to just me. And I think that was the biggest adjustment, not having a manager or not having, peers or colleagues to kind of bounce ideas off. So surround yourself with good people. And, I think also it is difficult, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to work. So I think just sort of keeping that sort of morale high, because it is all on you. And, I didn't take a holiday for the first 11 months, right? It is all on you, because if you don't do something, then it's not going to get done. But I think take that risk. And I think, sort of celebrate your successes as well. And I think I didn't really do a lot of that in the first year. I landed some amazing clients, and I don't really think I stepped back to celebrate that. And I think that's really, important.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, take the risk. I guess the worst that can happen, like you say, is you can do a bit of consultancy or whatever, depending on your industry. And in most cases, you can go back and you can find a role if it doesn't work out after a few months. So that's interesting. And then surrounding yourself with great people. Is that more in terms of kind of partners, or is that in terms of people that you're actually going to be working together with? Or can you tell us a bit more about that sort of thing, Shabri?
Yeah, so I think it's two things. So I think firstly, growing your network. So things like attending webinars or going to events or joining different communities. Actually building your network. And I sort of made a thing that anytime I meet someone, I try and grab a coffee with them and just try and spot what's out there and who's out there and things like that. And I think the other thing is, grow your ecosystem. So find out who are the partners and companies that you might be able to work with that, might be targeting similar people to you, but be doing a completely different product or service. So how can you build those ecosystems where you have referrals and you have partners and alliances and things like that?
Got it. Good stuff. And Shabri, we like to ask everyone that comes on, if you could thank just one person, either dead or alive, for having a positive influence on yourself and your career, who would that be and why?
Great question. I've never been asked that before. I think I'd say my father. I think I'd say my dad. My dad started his own business about 30 years ago. And so I think seeing his work ethic and his entrepreneurial flair has had a huge impact on me, and I think led me to where I am today.
Great stuff. Well, everyone, you've been tuning in to Sam's Business Growth Show, where we sit down with business leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs from around the globe. We find out their story, how digital marketing has helped them along the way, and their exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your business. Shabri, tell us a bit more about your business and the best way people can get in touch with you and connect with you.
Great. So, as I've talked about on this podcast, SalesWorks works and focuses on sales team development, so through consulting and training. We're co-located in Boston and London. And so if anyone would like to have a chat and just bounce ideas and share insights around what's working for them and what's not working for them as it relates to their sales team, I'd love to have a chat. You can find us on salesworks.co.uk, connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can also find us on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Awesome, Shabri. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Sam, for having me. My pleasure.
Appreciate it. I think there are a couple questions. We'll end the podcast itself there. Let's just see. I think there was a couple questions that came up in the chat. If anyone has got any quick questions, we'll just leave the chat running for a couple minutes. If anyone's got any sales-based, sales training-based, or digital marketing questions they want to run by us, we can go through those for the next couple of minutes. There's one question from Angeline. Do we recommend a straight line system? So, I don't know if you want to take that, Shabri.
Yeah, Angeline, thank you for your question first. I'm not sure what you mean by a straight line system.
It could be, I think, if I remember right, Jordan Belfort's got a selling platform or selling system called the straight line system. So it could be that that's what she means. It could be that Angeline's talking about a specific selling system. So like you've got Sandler selling or Challenger sell or whatever it may be.
Okay.
But yeah, that's one I've only just heard of, to be fair. So I couldn't say whether that's a good or bad one to follow.
Yeah.
Is there a specific system that you recommend, Shabri, or is there one that you employ, or does it vary depending on the company and things?
So I think it depends a lot on the company, and it depends a lot on the product or service they're selling. So for more enterprise clients, we definitely recommend more of a solution selling, challenge and sale approach. All of our training does cover bits of the methodologies that have really resonated with us over the years. So some of the stuff is quite standard. Some of the standard stuff I don't particularly agree with. So we kind of have a blended approach of all the different methodologies.
Cool. Okay. Good stuff. That's mostly here. We had a good point from Andrew earlier, which I quite liked when he was talking about recruiting salespeople.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about the last deal you blew and how they handled that question. So that was quite a nice ad. What else have we got here? Angeline also add, do your online courses have tutor support? That was one for you, Shabri.
Great question, Angeline. So we do have training that is a program, and that program is paired with one-to-one coaches, so one-to-one tutors and one-to-one coaches. We don't have online courses in the way that they're e-learning. All of our courses are live. So it's not self-guided, they're all live, and then you have the option of having coaching to supplement that.
Great stuff. All right, guys, we'll keep it open for another minute or so. If there's any other questions in terms of sales training, in terms of digital marketing, more than happy to run those through. And then we'll wrap things up.
Great to see all the live questions coming through.
Yeah, there's been some good feedback. Emmanuel said this earlier, quite often sales is more about the way you can play with the customer psychology rather than anything else. Interesting.
That is interesting.
Thanks for the feedback, Shiv. Thanks, Nishan, for tuning in. And Katie, really like the recruiting technique. Thanks very much, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
And thanks, Anab, for tuning in. Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, Shabri. So, yeah, thanks very much for coming on. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll have another show coming up in the next few days.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Thank you so much. It's great to be on.
Cheers. Take care.